Okay, so I'm just going to show you these front engine mounts. What I did was last winter I brought home one of the Ford engines. I had to do some work on it anyway. So I actually built the cradle to hold it, and the bolt holes, the bolts that were in it already were for the engine mounts on the Ford engines. So what I'd done is before I took that away, I measured to the crankshaft centers on both engines and to the back of the flywheel so that I was able to set the Cummins up in the cradle in exactly the right place. And then I built a template, a wooden template of the mounts that I have on here. Took measurements off those, sent them into the engineering place, and they actually cut them for me in 12mm steel, which then I welded up. The original front mounts from the 45 are these. They mount something like that, so they have like an angled rubber engine mount in there. You can't really do much with the likes of that. The one for the DAF 55, on the other hand, were these. I never saw these were cut out, so there's half of them missing. But if you actually had a set of those, you could just modify them and they would work. Surprisingly light, actually, that they're only about, I don't know what that is, maybe 8mm steel, if that. But maybe I went overkill with 12mm, but I don't want it falling. So those are the front mounts anyway. They just bolt into the original parts. And as you can see, you can buy engine mounts to convert it, but a lot of them apparently can foul on the raw water pump, or they just get in the way. They sit up around here. But again, I was quite happy to make these. I paid about €125 to have all the steel plates cut. That was enough to do both engine mounts, and then a little extra then again for welding, etc., welding rods and bits and pieces like that, grinding discs, cutting discs and stuff. The back mount I have yet to work out, because this is the mounting point for the other engine, and what it looks like I'll have to do, because these bell housings don't have any engine mount position, I may have to mount it off the back plate. I did get some extra pieces cut when I was getting those ones done, triangles that might make a mount for there, but I'd have to come a long way forward to make this bolt. And what I may be able to do is actually just move the mounting in the boat back. I need to have a look at that on board, probably just after I have the engine out, and make a final decision on that, but we're not quite to that yet anyway. So for now I just have them. See, this was all welded in place when I set the engine up. I had one welded across under the oil pan there as well, but I cut that out when I wanted to take the oil pans off. But yeah, kind of a reasonably cheap way of doing it. I think it was probably a pretty good saving on buying the conversion mounts. Okay, so I was wondering what to do about this bottom radiator hose inlet, because it's a 2.5-inch fitting, and the one on the heat exchanger is a 2-inch, I think. You need this for your alternator bracket, but I don't like. You could use it. You could just adapt the piece of piping, but I don't like just the way it goes. It would be kind of a double elbow and a U-bend, and it just doesn't really work great. Just I don't like having to put in loads of unnecessary bends in the pipework. So I was wondering what to do about it. You can buy one that comes straight out from the US, but it doesn't have any bracket for the alternator or anywhere to put one. What it is, it's designed to have this, what they call the high accessory mount, I think, which can carry AC pumps and stuff like that higher up. But the fitting's only about $40 plus whatever duty and everything you'd have to pay. But the backplate's something like 500 or something like that, crazy. So I don't want to do all that messing around, so I'll show you now what I've come up with instead of this. So now what I have instead is this. I took the other one of these fittings, and just with the big 9-inch angle grinder, put a cut in here and cut this down completely off so that it makes a retaining bracket for this, which I'll just take out and show you. Right, so what I have now is this. So this has just been cut down, same piece, but just cut into a shape that was as far back as I wanted to take it. I don't want to weaken the casting completely for the alternator mount. The inside is quite an odd shape, so I had to round all that out. That was a bit of work with just a little stone die in an electric drill. I've just done this one now. So, and the other part is actually quite an odd fitting to get. I thought you'd get what size this is now. I think it's 1 3/4, but it's an unusual size anyway. But I just bought CR brass hose tail from ASAP Supplies or somewhere. There's actually a recess there, like a thermostat housing, so you can put that in completely flush. Again, with the 9-inch angle grinder, cut this off here. I had to grind these down a little bit to fit into the other, fit into that piece, and ground the outside so it's just lovely and snug in there. Plan now is, you probably could put a gasket behind that, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is fit this in and cut a gasket for this whole piece, so the gasket covers the two faces. I may seal that in as well a little bit, but I have no worry about that leaking. So that fits in quite nice and snugly, and then this will go straight over that with a gasket and bolt in tight. And I'll be able to go directly then with one size piece of piping just out and straight in here into the heat exchanger, which I think is a much tidier solution than having loads of bits of pipe work making up all the difference. So yeah, it was pretty it's a lot of messing around, but it's these are about 17 euros each, and besides that, the cutting disc and the little dies, that's about all it cost. So it's the cheapest way I could see of doing it anyway. That's nice and tidy and reliable. Okay, before I get into the turbos, I've lost a bit of footage on freeing up the housings. So one thing you'll have to do if you're going from a lorry to the marine exhaust manifold is the turbo needs reconfiguring. And what I mean by that is the housings, that the oil feed has to be in the top, pretty much vertical, and the oil drain out the bottom. If you simply just turn the turbo, you've destroyed the oil flow and it won't work. The compressor housing is quite easy to rotate because you can just open the V-band and they're generally not that stuck. A bit of a tap and they'll come free. But the exhaust housing seizes quite solidly onto the centerpiece. So what I had to do, and I've done it a few times now on them, is to heat the exhaust housing up with the blowtorch. Probably oxyacetylene or something would be better, but I only have the big blowtorch there. And not so pleasantly hit it with a big hammer until it's free. Both of these ones actually came free quite easily. They weren't the rustiest turbos I've had to deal with. The ones that I have I have a Cummins turbo on one of my Fords, and that took an awful lot of abuse to get it free. You do have to be reasonably careful because you can damage the turbine blades as the housing begins to move out. But once you've got it to the point where it's moving at all, you're kind of you're already in a better situation. I don't know. I don't know how sensitive these exhaust housings are to cracking, but they seem to be pretty bloody tough. I've given them quite a beating to get them off. I'll just separate this one now. You don't necessarily have to get the housing off completely, as it's you just need it to be able to rotate there. So see, can you see that? These did in fact come free, so I'll just take them off to show you. So they get quite stuck in this joint around here. And sometimes I think as well this heat shield can get stuck completely. So you may be able to rotate it, but not actually take the housing away. But once you can rotate it, and as long as these little guys haven't sheared off in the back of the housing and you don't have to retap them, then you shouldn't have too much of a problem. And like I said, the compressor housing is easy to rotate after to whichever position you want to get it to. I'll be running new oil feeds, so I wasn't worried about taking them off. I just left them on to keep it clean. And I have a piece just to show you now about rotating these oil drains, because as this housing rotates, that originally goes out over the housing, and as it rotates, because it's off-centered, eventually you'll hit the oil drain coming out, and it won't allow you to rotate it into the position that you need. Now, the other thing about these is those CM600 manifolds weren't really designed to have a turbo sat on the back. If you want quite a compact system, they say to just run the turbo upside down, or the turbine housing upside down. So you're talking about running it that way. I'll show you a little bit about the clearance issues that creates against the bell housing and stuff after. I have enough room to run the turbo up the normal way, so that's what I'm going to do. So that gives me plenty of room for my oil drain and everything again underneath, so I'll show you that after. The other turbo is set up on the other engine now, and I've got the oil drain and everything worked out, cut to length and everything on that, so we'll take a look at that as well. On the other side of things, the engines were lifted out today, so I've got my two exhaust elbows. This one has already been altered. I altered that last year when I put the Cummins turbo on the Ford. I had that V-band flange made on there, which meets perfectly with the exit on the Cummins turbo, on the H1C turbo, and just has a V-band to connect it. I had problems with it leaking and stuff the way it was, so I had them make that. But this one, the other Ford actually had a whole set H1E turbo on it, which had a different type of thing. So as I was selling the engine, I told the guy, look, I'll just cut that off. I'll have my new end welded on these because I was retaining the elbows, and he can weld the elbow he has straight onto what's left rather than trying to open the bolts and stuff on the other turbo, which just wasn't going to happen. And the other thing I have is my two gearboxes are there. Got to get them just cleaned up, serviced. One's pretty clean because it was out last year and the paint's held up really nicely on it, so probably give it a freshen up, but it looks good. The other one's obviously a bit of a mess. I'll sort that out as well. And the drive plate, I have one of the drive plates. So that was one I bought last year. I just got a message to say the second one is arriving. It's been on back order now for ages. So they're what I had on the Fords, and they'll go straight onto the Cummins as well. Okay, so these are the oil returns for the turbo. When you want to reconfigure the turbo, with the way I'm going to do it, it's going to hit the exhaust housing. When you rotate the exhaust housing, that's going to hit it. So I've had to change them so that they're in line like this one. I'm actually just heating it up with the blowtorch, and I managed to heat it up enough to melt the braze and rotate it. Takes quite a lot of heat, but it did work anyway. Saved me having to cut it off and re-weld it all. Now, sorry about the light, it is dark out and there's not much light where these engines are sitting, but this is what I've been at recently. I've just been getting the coolers kind of mounted on there. I'm going to take those off again and paint them. I've decided I will paint those. I've cut away some of the excess mounting bracket there just to tidy it up, and I actually drilled the second one of those and tapped it, so that's tapped straight into that mount rather than the back ones going through the original place and into the bolt hole. Again, not necessary. I did have to move that cooler out from where I wanted to have it because I've been playing with the pipe work and I just couldn't get those elbows in and to work with it without making a custom metal elbow. It wasn't going to work, but this has all come together quite nicely now. As you can see, the oil feed or the oil drain going down there. I will go through all the pipe work I did when I'm putting it together on the other engine, but it just clearances that nicely as well all the way around. There's actually a gap all the way around on that, and that's just the dairy stainless steel I got, which is quite a nice neat job for it. I've also used a piece to do the long run for the raw water side there, and I had one oil filler, but I have got another piece to do that bit of oil filler on this engine. Gearbox cooler should be here this week as well, so I can get them plumbed in and get that plumbed into that cooler there. And we'll be getting the drive plates and stuff on as well. The air intake boost pipe, that needs altering coming off the turbo, need a longer piece, so I need to weld that up. Other than that, I still haven't got a final decision on what I'm going to do here with joining those two up. I think I'm just going to get two 90-degree elbows and put them together. But again, I'll go through all the pipe work again after this. Okay, so we'll just take a look at the different turbo configurations. So this is what I'm going to go with. I'm going to run the boost pipe over the top of the manifold and straight in there. I've already altered these slightly. I had to lower this one down a little. That was just because it was off the DAF 55. And what else did I do with that? Nothing else to that one. This has to be lengthened a bit. The pieces of pipe I have for there I've kept off the lorry. The oil drain, that's fine. Plenty of fall in it all the way down there to the forward oil port. And as you can see, there's tons of room between that and the bell housing. It does mean the turbo stands out to the side a bit, but seeing as I have the heat exchanger off to the side and I have the space, it won't affect me. I did consider going with it the other way. I've set this one up here kind of just so you can look and see the way it's done. But you'd need somebody made a wedge to fit in here to lift the turbo up at a 25-degree angle and create plenty of space underneath for the oil drain and all that stuff. But it was another part I'd have to buy, and if I don't essentially need it, I'm not going to. I thought about maybe getting a 1 inch, getting a 1 inch turbo spacer, and just fitting it in there. That would give me, it would get it far enough back here that I could possibly clear that, or at very least get a, give me a little bit of space just here. I may have to even have had to grind a little bit out of the adapter plate, which wouldn't have mattered much, but it just means that if you have to, say I have a drive plate fail during the season or in the boat, whatever, and I have to take this off, then suddenly the turbo's in the way and that needs to come off, and then you need turbo gaskets, and you're probably dealing with rusty studs on the turbo and all of that at that stage. So it's just really unnecessary problems. It would make, like if you had the smaller heat exchanger or a different heat exchanger that sat in well, or you could keep out of the way, then it would make a much more compact arrangement, and you could keep this pipe nice and low, possibly come back here and up. I will have to cross the back of the last valve cover. It's not a mad issue, it just means you have to take off the boost pipe when you want to set the tappets. But that should be okay. So that's the different situations with the turbo. Again, another thing is the oil drain. Well, the angle's all wrong here now, the way it's set up, but it would also be a lot more complicated, and you don't have as much fall down to the return pipe. Probably not such an issue unless you've got a very steep inclination angle on the when it's installed. I don't, but somebody may. Now, the reason I've gone ahead a little with this engine and not the other one is I was waiting to get these gaskets, the exhaust manifold gaskets. These are the ones that are normally in them with the cast iron manifolds, and they'd probably be alright, but the faces of the outlets aren't particularly smooth anymore, and again, steel and this aluminium header tank and stuff, but Lansing Marine did these ones, which came with one manifold, but I only bought one manifold off Lansing Marine. I didn't realise they sent the gaskets with it, so I rang them up and ordered another batch of these. They're nice, a bit thicker, and hopefully they'll seal quite well. I've already got them in there, and that's torqued up and done. So that's those. Other thing I was waiting for was the oil filters. I ordered a bunch of stuff from JSK Auto or something in the UK. I wanted to go with the Fleet Guard filters. Keep hearing good things about them, so I'll give them a go. I did order fuel filters as well, but they were actually wrong. They were water separators, and I didn't know there was so many different ones for the Cummins, so I sent back the filters. I ended up with a different fuel filter, but I'm going to use the Fleet Guard oil filters anyway. So that's that. Hoses, I need to go through those as well. I'll get the hose pipe work finished, I think, before I go through all of that. As per usual, I fill the filter with oil and a bit of oil around the rubber seal. Make sure it's sealed up nicely and that you can get it off again in the future. And nice and hand tight. Yeah. That's those. Right, so this is the third ring gear I've had to order for this job. Hopefully this is finally the right one. I have the right motif anyway. Just give a little wipe of pre-wipe to take off the storage grease that's on it. I'll be heating it anyway, but so again, I'm just going to Loctite all these, and it's 101 foot-pounds of torque. They're 18s. Nothing's ever 18. Usually have to jam the ring gear to get those to get to that torque. I like to tighten them diagonally if I can at all, with most things. Just double check the first two again. Right. these all have split washers on them, so I'm not going to put lots of those on them. This plate seems to be a bit tighter in the recess. And that's about it. That's that all bolted in anyway. That bolt wouldn't start, so I've just left out the opposite one. There's 10 bolts in there. The other drive plate only had 6 in it before anyway. And they don't, even the clutch on the lorry only had 6 bolts, so I think there's more than enough in 12 bolts there, or 10 bolts. So that's the first one of those done. Second drive plate's supposed to arrive tomorrow. I need to get the gearboxes cleaned up now and put the adapter plates onto them, but I'm probably going to stick them onto the back of the engine here for now anyway. Okay, so the torque setting on that says 32 foot-pounds for the standard manifold, so I'm just going to do the same on these. Seems quite a lot actually.